On today's Locked On Giants podcast, CBS Sports draft analyst and Football Gameplan's Emory Hunt dropped in to talk about the Giants draft strategy, best fits, values, and more. That's coming your way next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family. Your team every day. I'm Patricia Trainer, your host, P-Train, credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for Giants Country over on the SI Network, part of Fan Nation. And a welcome on in to my everydayers, my Blue Crew community members, my newcomers, and everybody in between. You are all loved and appreciated by yours truly. Please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you watch us on YouTube, it would sure help a lot. And on today's Locked On Giants podcast, I promised you that I would bring him back. He is here, the best looking guy on the Giants beat, the best dressed. He is the czar of the playbook, as his shirt says, if you're watching the YouTube video. CBS Sports analyst and Football Gameplan's very own Emory Hunt. Emory, welcome in, my friend.
I'm glad to be back, Patty. You know, it's football season when I'm on the show, or getting close to it. I guess we can count spring and draft as football season. It's never stopping.
Nope, it doesn't. And of course, Emory is coming off a very busy period. He has put out his latest draft guide. He's going to tell you about that a little later on in the program, how to get it, what it contains and whatnot. But we're going to talk a little bit about this draft because, look, that's the rage right now for the NFL. Teams are getting ready to do the draft. And Emory, I want to start off by asking you about the value at quarterback versus receivers for a team like the Giants. Knowing what you know about the prospects, where is the better value for the Giants at 6, do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question and a great framing of the question, because the better value, based off how I've graded these quarterbacks, is probably at receiver for pick 6. Now, if we're talking about pick 4, we have a different conversation. Or pick 3, definitely have a different conversation. But at pick 6, without any movement, wide receiver. And I feel like the Giants are in a situation where they can start the run on receivers. And because I feel like there's going to be a run on receivers, and there's going to be a run on offensive tackles, and there's going to probably be a slight run on edge rushers. But I feel like receivers, tackles in that order, and edge rushers. So whoever takes the first one of those 3 is likely to start the run. And at pick 6, the Giants could potentially start that wave, so they get their pick of the best ones that they want at 6.
Who do you like for the Giants? Who do you think realistically fits them, and who will be there at 6?
Listen, this is a great class. So they can go any one of these options, right? Whether it's Rome Odunze, whether it's Malik Neighbors, whether it's Marvin Harrison Jr. Those 3, I believe you can't go wrong with. Keon Coleman is another one that I really like. Although some people may say this 6 is a little bit too high, but he has those alpha traits that you like. A.D. Mitchell out of Texas, some may say that's a little bit too high at 6, but he has those alpha-like traits, and I feel like that's what the Giants need, someone that's out there as the guy, because they have a bunch of good 2s and 3s, guys that are hired guns at different aspects of their game, whether it's a speed guy that can get vertical, whether it's a slot guy that can do a lot of, make you miss type of things when he has the football in his hands, but they need an alpha, and there's 5 alphas that they can go with at 6. So anyone they choose out of those names I've listed, I don't think they can go wrong in any direction.
I mean, sticking with receivers, let me ask you about something that I've been reading, and I want to get your take on it. I've been reading that, of the top 3, Harrison Jr., Odunze, and Neighbors, that maybe Harrison isn't ranked as highly amongst the NFL community as maybe some of the draftniks are. Do you agree with that? And how would you kind of stack up those top 3 guys?
I agree completely with that because he's not my number one. I didn't even grade him as an X receiver. I graded him as a Z because I feel like he can improve on getting better off bump press. So you kind of want him a little bit off the line of scrimmage as of right now. But my number one X is Rome Odunze. My number one Z is Malik Neighbors, and I have Keon Coleman as my number 2 Z in front of Harrison, who's 3rd. But I have an 81 grade on Harrison, 82 grade, I believe, on Harrison. So I do think highly of him. But I have those other 2 guys ahead of him, and I have obviously Odunze ahead of him, and also Neighbors. So for me, it's that's the thing. So when I watched him, I felt like Neighbors is explosive, and he could win from anywhere on a football field. I feel like Jermaine Burton is the same type. I have a higher grade on Burton than I do on Harrison. He's another explosive guy. Both Burton and Neighbors have that OBJ, Giants type explosiveness. You know what I'm saying? Where you just throw him a slant and they're gone, or a hitch. They could turn around and just go. Adunze is a smooth receiver that can win in a lot of different ways. Great release off the line of scrimmage, great route runner, catch the ball well over his shoulders, can go up top and make the plays above the rim. So can A.D. Mitchell, who I feel like is a lot like C.D. Lamb, where he can win short and also can win deeper down the field. Harrison, I felt like a lot of his big plays were a little bit schemed open that weren't the, red zone, go ball, go win above the rim. He can do that all day. He's excellent at that. But in terms of within the 20 to 20 range, you got to be a little bit more nuanced. I just feel like there's a lot more room for him to grow and develop. So again, if they took him at 6, wouldn't bat an eye at that because he is outstanding. If you want him to be that number, especially if you're looking at it in conjunction with what the Giants have currently, he fits in perfectly. So yeah, if you told me he wasn't your number 1, I wouldn't disagree. If you told me he was your number 1, I wouldn't be upset at it.
I personally like Odunze. It's just his overall game to me, I think just fits perfectly with what the Giants, I think, aspire to do. But that's just my take on it. I don't know how the NFL community feels about, how they stack up, but I just wanted to mention that real quick. I've made no secret of the fact that I will be very happy if the Giants get Odunze in this draft. But anyway, let's talk quarterbacks. Now, there is this common belief that there will be 4 off the board before the Giants even get to on the clock. The wild card here is J.J. McCarthy. And I want to get your take on him because some people say that, yes, he belongs up there with the top guys. Some people say, he didn't really show a whole lot in Michigan, because they didn't really throw as much. Where do you stand on J.J. McCarthy?
I feel like if we were just picking guys based off talent, and, I know people will say, well, quarterbacks always get pushed up. I mean, the Giants have one right now starting under center that got pushed up significantly. But if we're just taking guys based off what their film says, he should be a second-round player, right? Nothing wrong with that. You can win with second-round talent at quarterback. Jalen Hurts was a second-round pick, right? But I feel like it's no fault of his own, obviously, that they push these guys in the conversation. There's a difference between a Caleb Williams and a JJ McCarthy. There's like a significant difference. So when you push guys up, you kind of highlight the difference. So when we're talking about top 5 talents, there's really only 2 quarterbacks that are top 5 talents, and that's Williams and Jayden Daniels. Everyone else, you can flip a coin and say, okay, yeah, this guy does this thing well. This guy does that thing well. Yeah, we could probably win with him. But we have to have these things in place. And if you have a lot of those, we got to have these things in place when you're talking about a quarterback, then that's probably not the guy you want to take in the top 5 or should take in the top 5. You should take a different position right there, right? So I said all that to say, yes, and I'm not knocking him when I use this comparison. When you look at a Brock Purdy, even with what we've seen so far, you're not taking Brock Purdy in the top 5. You're taking, unless you're adding elite talents everywhere, like the San Francisco 49ers have. But if you see a guy and you think he's Patrick Mahomes, you take that in the top 5, right? Because of what he can do. Or if you see a guy that has the athletic traits of Lamar Jackson or whatnot, not to that extreme, but you take in that top 5, right? But for guys that can help you win, like he helped Michigan win, because this is the knock everybody throws on McCarthy, and I was out there defending him about this because people will say, well, they didn't ask him to throw at Michigan. How can you take him in the top 5? They didn't ask him to throw. Well, to push back on that, these are some of the same knocks that they use on triple option quarterbacks when they were coming out in Nebraska, when they're coming out these programs in the 90s. Like, well, they didn't throw a lot, so he can't throw. Like, no, but think about it from this perspective. Because they only threw so many times, imagine the emphasis and significance of those passes. Hey, man, you're only going to get 15 passes in this ball game. You better make 13 of them count. And so that level of pressure is different when you look at it from that perspective. Like if you're throwing the ball 40 times a game, yeah, you can miss 13 throws. I can go 28 to 40 and still be good, right? 27 to 40. But if you're 9 of 15, that looks horrible. You're losing. But if you're 13 to 17, 13 to 15, like, man, you were efficient. The ball moved down the field, didn't turn the ball over. You kept us in, positive down and distance situations. You made the plays that you had to make, that we asked you to make. That's good quarterbacking. So yes, he's a good quarterback, which is why I say second round. But when you're taking guys in the top 5, you want them to play well above the X's and O's. And I just feel like McCarthy is more Brock Purdy than he is Patrick Mahomes.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and to make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so that you can do more of it. And if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and is designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And if you find that your assigned therapist isn't a match, you can switch at any time for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. So sticking with McCarthy for a moment here, number 6 too high for him. Trading up, not a good idea, you think?
Absolutely too high. Like take another elite talent, because guys that I have graded ahead of, like just from my draft grades, who I have graded ahead of JJ McCarthy, I have Spencer Rattler. I feel like he has a liver arm. He's been battle tested, and you probably can get him at the top of round 2. So you can kind of play both sides, right? You can get the elite position player and get you a quarterback that you feel like is battle tested, that you didn't spend a lot of capital on, right? Or you can look at a guy later in the draft based on his health, because I feel like had he been healthy and gone through the playoffs and then gone through the post-game all-star game circuit and been able to participate in the combine, we would be talking a lot about Jordan Travis of Florida State. The ball moves, the offense moves. He's more athletic than JJ McCarthy. He's more dynamic. He's played a lot more bigger games. I know that sounds weird saying about a guy that just coming off a national championship, but Jordan Travis was playing elite level ball. But because he broke his leg, that part of the equation was incomplete on the back end. So you can get him probably on day 3. And we've seen day 3 players step in and play well, especially if everything around them is up to par. So you can use your whole draft building up for a guy that you can still work and develop and plug in there, and he'll be able to play for you really well. He could be the Brock Purdy for you in that sense. So I said all that to say you don't really have to reach for a quarterback at 6 if you're the Giants, because if you start to run on receivers and you feel like, okay, let's say the pick that will worry you would be the Broncos or the Raiders, right? Because they would probably want a quarterback. But the Giants do have the luxury if they want to trade back into the first round to not wait. And if that's the case, then you can get a guy like a Spencer Rattler, as opposed to, trying to force a guy at pick 6. And then now you're trying to defend that pick for 5 years, like they've done with the current starter under center.
So, Emory, I mean, my opinion has been right from the get-go, and it hasn't changed, that the Giants go receiver in the first round, quarterback, say, second round. Let's talk about some more of those second round picks. Like, we haven't spoken about Bo Nix, for example, Michael Penix Jr. When you look at those potential day 2 second round prospects, who do you like as being a good fit for the Giants that you think will realistically be there?
Well, that part of the question is the concern. Who will realistically be there? Because that's why I brought up the Broncos and the Raiders, because they sit dab smack right there in the middle of the first round, right? So if there's a big run on receipt, and we know the Broncos have a glaring need at quarterback, the Raiders, depending on what they tell you and how you feel about Minshew and Aiden O'Connell, I feel like they probably could go quarterback there. So you might not be in the Michael Penix or even Bo Nix sweepstakes if you're the Giants. You don't want to trade down from 6, and lose a chance on a top 10 talent, to trade back and you want to stay in the top 10 and get an elite talent at any position. So realistically, if those guys are there in round 2, then now you have great value, right? That's where you should probably lean. But man, the likelihood of those two, Knicks should be, because Knicks he reminds me a lot of Sam Howell. And we got the chance to see. I'm glad Sam Howell got the chance to start a full season as a 5th round pick, in an offense that had really good receivers. Granted, they couldn't really run the ball, and their defense was atrocious. But we got to see the best and worst of Sam Howell. I felt like they kind of moved off of him a little bit too quickly, but it's hard to say that when you're picking second. Maybe if they were picking like number 9, they'd still have Sam Howell because he wasn't terrible. But I feel like that's Bo Nix. I feel like Bo Nix should be at least a 2nd round pick. Or even Michael Pratt out of Tulane, which would be a good pick for the Giants, because he's another one that has athleticism. He played at Tulane, played big time ball, had the big win against USC in the Cotton Bowl. He's a bigger athlete. He's an athlete, and still has a lot of room to grow within this game. So if worst case scenario, Nix and Penix are there in the first round at 15, or whenever the Broncos pick and the Raiders pick, and those 2 guys are gone, I feel like Michael Pratt probably should be the one that Giants fans should keep an eye on, because he's a pretty good player.
We've been talking a lot about receivers and quarterbacks, but the Giants have some other needs, some sneaky needs, if you will. We can make a case, obviously, for cornerback too, and this is a very deep cornerbacks class, although more slanted, I think, to the slots than to the outside guys, but still a deep class. You can make a case maybe for a developmental offensive tackle. I believe this is a deep class for offensive tackles as well. So let's talk a little bit about some of these sneaky needs that the Giants have and how it matches up with the class in terms of the best prospects that maybe can fill some of these needs.
Cornerback is the one that jumps out at me, and I like to say combo safety. So guys that can play, that are technically safeties, but they can cover. And it's unique because we don't have Wink Martindale to really kind of have they like this type of guy, right? So you really kind of have to wait and see what type of guy they like. But if you're just picking up pure cover ability, and you don't care about him being 6'2" with long arms, Max Melton of Rutgers is phenomenal. Like, he can mirror and match rather well. He can turn the ball over. He's active around the ball. He's a fantastic player, and he was well coached by Greg Schiano at Rutgers. So you can't go another one of these sight unseen type corners. Oh, he came from Rutgers, defensive player. I'm all in. So Melton would be one. DJ Daniel of Auburn, probably, I would say, arguably one of the top 3 or 4 pure cover corners. And people will look at his size. He's 5'11", 179. all right, whatever. We can get 5 pounds on them, and you can get them up to 185. Like that, the weight is not a problem, but the cover skills is awesome. Um, Now the Giants chose not to go receiver at 6 and chose to go corner, and Terrion Arnold is the best pure cover corner in the draft, and I wouldn't be upset if they went that way because of how deep receiver is. Um, so you think about some combo safeties like even if you think about someone like Thomas Harper, maybe around on day 2 out of Notre Dame. He can cover like a slot corner, but also gives you that ability to play the run because he's a safety, so he's physical, but he's also very good athletically, so he can cover. I just like those guys, and Quantez Stiggers. It's hard to say um the young guy, but he is a young guy because he's only like 23, but he's coming off of a All Pro rookie season in the CFL with the Toronto Argonauts. Had a really good East West Shrine Bowl. He was on an all rookie team last season for the Argonauts. So he didn't play college ball. So he's someone that you can probably get on day 2. He can play inside or outside. He has pro experience already, high level pro experience in one season, and is coming off of a great All-Star game circuit. So there's some options for the Giants at corner and over safety.
Yeah, that's a big need for them. Obviously, they're not bringing back Adoree Jackson, it looks like. They've tried to fill that position with veterans, and they haven't had any luck. And, it's just amazing how the strength of the draft class at each position kind of matches up with the Giants' needs. Now, Emory, let's talk some more about the defensive side of the ball, because I think – and, Joe Shane obviously may disagree, but I think the Giants could certainly use more help with edge rusher, more defensive line depth. How are those classes stacking up, do you think?
I think the defensive tackle class, the interior defensive line, is solid in terms of depth. Like my number one nose tackle is McKinley Jackson out of Texas A&M. He is outstanding. He's a mauler inside. It gives you some depth there. And in terms of the edge rushing talent, by them bringing in Brian Burns, it kind of takes that off the table in round 1 obviously at pick 6. But when you think about guys that you can, like, I think the biggest thing for their front 7 is health. If the guys that they do have can stay healthy, they have good depth. But how can we bank on health? That's the big unknown, the variable. Even inside linebacker would be another place where they can kind of use some guys, right? Like Edgerrin Cooper of Texas A&M. Listen, when I've watched Texas A&M for a while, right? Watching him play and watching their defensive front 7 play. That's why McKinley Jackson was my number one nose tackle. But watching the defensive front 7 for Texas A&M play, it reminded me of what Texas A&M defense used to look like. Like guys used to fly around and just thump people all throughout the game. Like that old Wrecking Crew defense, a little bit when they had that win and those guys too. But Cooper can cover, but he can thump downhill. So he's a really good inside backer. Obviously, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. gives you a little bit of both. He plays the run really well, but I think he's a little bit more savvy in coverage. He can cover both man and also zone. So you don't have to take him off the field. And that's someone that has been dependable. He's been rock solid for Clemson, in that regard. And, so all the way across the board, there's some, unique talents. But what's making this tough for me is, again, we don't know what the defensive preference is now. Under Wink, we kind of had a body type, stylistic type that we could look for and pinpoint and kind of fit prospects with. But this is something unique, which makes it all more the fun.
Hey, Giant fans, the sports calendar is loaded, and FanDuel's making it even more exciting to get in on the action, because right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use to bet the tourney, MLB, NBA, NHL, and much more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I want to bounce back to quarterback, and I want to talk about Daniel Jones for a moment because he continues to divide the fan base. You got those who say he's going to be fine, improve the supporting cast around him. You got those that say get rid of him already. I feel that the injury history is a huge, huge red flag, and all the and emphasizing why that they need to take a quarterback because I just don't trust the injury history. But when you look at Daniel Jones last year, some people have argued that he was shell shocked. Some people have argued that that's what he really is. What was your assessment of him, and can they salvage this guy?
He's shown, I've been with Daniel Jones since my position on Daniel Jones since he was drafted. So some people say, well, you're just going to say that because you didn't like him as a prospect. Like, well, I just felt like he was overdrafted, and it's probably a glorified QB2. His biggest threat to me is Drew Lock, because Drew Lock has a lot of the Daniel Jones traits in terms of athleticism. He has a stronger arm, and he also has a willingness to throw it downfield. And that, to me, could be why the Giants could potentially be a wild card at 6 to not even take a quarterback. But I feel like Daniel Jones, one, and you've talked about this a lot over the last couple seasons, especially last year, the money is the reason why he's still going to – you can't move off the money until you can move off the money, right? So it's not like he's going to be on the roster. But I feel like he's your QB2. And it's going to be fascinating to watch him and Drew Lock, because I feel like Drew Lock is going to win that job if it's a fair competition. Now, if it's a financial competition, then Daniel Jones will be your starter going into the season. But if it's hey, we got to win football games competition, Lock could win it, and your rookie quarterback, if you draft one at 6 or if you draft one in round 2, will be your game day inactive guy, right? Or not in game day inactive, but he'll be your emergency QB3, because you got 2 veterans in Lock and Jones playing, and that way you don't have to rush and ruin a rookie quarterback by throwing him out there. But I feel like this is Drew Lock's job if it's a fair football competition. But financially, Daniel Jones will be on this roster and will be your starter if it's a financial competition.
And of course, Giants brass are saying the expectation is that Daniel Jones will be the starter. Expectation, not Daniel Jones will be the starter. Big, big difference in the context in the meeting. So it's interesting because I have been of the opinion that, look, have a competition. Unless you're a top 5 at your position, have a competition. And that goes the same for Evan Neal at right tackle, who, now they've got Jermaine Illuminor coming in, who can play that right tackle spot if need be. Don't just hand jobs to guys because of their contracts and or draft pedigree. Would you agree?
Absolutely. That's why the Pittsburgh Steelers are what they are. We know Mike Tomlin will play the best guy. He doesn't care about draft status. He don't care about pedigree. Are you the best? Are you one of the 11? Are you one of the best 53? If you are, you will earn and get that job. And if the Giants or any team really believes in competition, Pete Carroll was one like that. That's how Russell Wilson became Russell Wilson. 3rd round pick, started over the newly signed, highly free agent Matt Flynn. Like, the best guy should play. And yeah, if you're having truly open competitions across the board, you bring out the best in everybody.
Absolutely. I'm all for that. Emory, final question for you. And I like to ask this of all my draft analysts. What do you think would be the biggest shock to those of us who follow it from the outside? Maybe something that's not aligning with the media and the fans, but is very well known within the NFL circles as far as how maybe this draft will unfold.
If the Giants go cornerback at 6 as opposed to receiver or quarterback, I think people have really resigned themselves to the fact that they're probably not going to take a quarterback at 6, and they're not going to move up to get a quarterback. But no one's talking about cornerback being a significant need for the Giants, because they just think that, they drafted Tate Banks last year in the 1st round. Yes, you need more than one corner, right? So I feel like corner is not being talked about. I know people have talked about offensive line, so that wouldn't shock people. I know people have talked about receiver a lot. No one's really talked about the potential of Brock Bowers being a Giant at 6, although that would be shocking. But, listen, he's a good player. But I feel like cornerback would shock a lot of people. But when you sit back and think about it, it shouldn't be shocking for a lot of people.
It's a big need. Absolutely. I mean, the question is do the Giants view it as a bigger need than receiver? I mean, it's all in how they have it graded. And also, I would think the depth of the class has something to do with it too, where if you say to yourself, okay, maybe I can get, a cornerback in round 2, and I'll take my receiver in round 1, and then I'll just wait on the quarterback or something like that. I mean, it's wild. I mean, there's so many different ways they can go.
Yeah, so many different scenarios because, like we talked about, we laid out probably 5 potential second round targets at quarterback, and we know 3 of those are probably going to end up get taken in round 1, which limits, like, dang, do we have to jump in the first round to reach on a guy that we thought we was going to be able to sit back and wait to get in round 2, and that receiver? If we start the run, we know if we pick a receiver here, I'm saying we in terms of the Giants. If I'm the Giants and I'm saying if we take the receiver here, we know 5 receivers are going to come off the board. Now, is our wide receiver 6, is his grade higher enough than our cornerback 1 or our cornerback 4? Like, what's the line before we say, you know what? All right, we'll take the cornerback 1 because our wide receiver 6 still has a very high enough grade. And all of those conversations are being had within that front office right now because it's a unique spot. It's not like the Giants are picking top 3. It's not like they're picking 15th, where you kind of can see how stuff will probably fall and will push you in a decision, into a decision. It's 6 is a real tough spot, to be completely honest, because you have 3 major needs and is deep at receiver. It's very good at corner. It's just about, like, all right, how deep at receiver, how good at corner can we get? How good of a corner we can get in round 2, or do we take the best corner here now because we knew we can get very good receiver at round 2, or do we trade back into the first round to get a very good receiver? But we got to take the elite corner now. So it's fascinating to really try to figure out how the pieces will fall for a team in a very unique spot at 6.
Thank goodness I don't have to make that decision.
It's hard.
I could sit here and Monday morning quarterback all I want about it. But Emory, before I let you go, tell everybody about your fantastic draft guide. I was reading a little bit about it. Tell everybody what it entails and how they can get it.
It's my 5th year putting out a digital draft guide. So this one has 900 prospects in it, individual scouting report. So everyone has a full scouting report on them. It helps you out throughout the whole draft process, post-draft, at free agency, and undrafted rookie free agents and all that stuff, even during the season when guys pop on the roster. But you can order it at footballgameplan.com/2024 draft guide. And again, if you have been a loyal supporter, I know Giants fans have supported the draft guide for the 5 years. You're sitting on over 4,300 individual scouting reports if you've gotten all 5. So you have a pretty good library on prospects. But this one was fun to put together, as always. The largest draft guide in existence. No one will have a larger draft guide of individual scout reports than I. And this one is readily available, full color PDF form. It's not a full physical copy, so don't ask. It's a PDF, and it's readily available at footballgameplan.com/2024 draft guide.
All right, I'm going to have to pick up my copy because you really do your homework. And not over 900 prospects, you said?
Yeah, 900. Last year was over 1,000.
And you think about it, I don't think that they're not, not even half of those guys are going to go in the draft. But, you're going to have free agents, like you said, and whatnot. So that's amazing. And you always do such a good job. I mean, you do your homework, whether you agree with it, people agree with you or not. You do your homework and you make your arguments. And that's one of the reasons why I think you're always so successful. And I told you, back in the day before you landed on CBS Sports, I told you were headed for bigger and better things. Didn't I not?
You saw it before I did. So, and I always got to give you your props on that, because sometimes you just think like you're going to continue to swim in the same pool, but lo and behold, here I am, right? And you saw it.
Here you are. And I appreciate that you still take the time to talk to little peons like me.
Stop it.
We're friends, folks. I mean, I kid with him all the time. But anyway, Emory, thank you so much for coming on the podcast with me to talk draft. Hopefully, I can get you on after the draft because I'm always interested in your take on what the Giants do and everything like that. So I wish you continued success. Can't wait to see what you put in that guide. I'm going to go order my copy this afternoon. Make sure I get that and have it ready. Giant fans, check him out. He is FB Football Gameplan. Check out the draft guide, like he said. And Giant fans, keep it here on the Locked On Giants podcast. We'll continue to have new shows for you all week long as we gear up for the draft. It's going to be a very fun, very interesting draft for the New York Giants. For Emory Hunt, I'm Patricia Traina. Giant fans, we'll see you tomorrow.